Maya sat on the edge of her bed, the sun setting gently over the city of Chicago, casting long shadows across the room. Her apartment, though modest, had always felt like a sanctuary, a place where she could retreat from the chaos of the world. But today, it felt different. Today, there was an unsettling stillness to the apartment, a kind of quiet that settled in her chest and made her feel uneasy. She had always been a social person, someone who loved going out with friends, attending events, and spending weekends with family. But recently, life had started to take a turn. Her job had become more demanding, and her relationships, though once fulfilling, had begun to feel shallow. Maya had grown tired of the noise, the constant interaction, the endless social media notifications, and the pressure to always be on. One day, after a particularly overwhelming week at work, she had made a decision. She would disconnect. She would take a break from it all. No friends, no family visits, no social media, and most importantly, no work. She would spend an entire week alone in her apartment, in silence. Maya didn't have a specific goal in mind. She wasn't sure if she was looking for peace, clarity, or simply a break. But she felt deep down that this was something she needed. She turned off her phone, closed her laptop, and pulled the blinds shut, embracing the solitude that had seemed so appealing just a few days ago. The first day alone was exactly what Maya had expected: peaceful and quiet. She spent the morning reading a book she'd been meaning to start for months, but had never found the time for. The apartment felt like a cocoon, and she felt safe inside it, away from the pressures of the outside world. She cooked herself a simple lunch, savoring each bite, feeling the comfort of solitude wrap around her like a warm blanket. But as the day wore on, the silence began to settle more heavily. Maya found herself reaching for her phone more than once, instinctively wanting to check her social media, to see what her friends were doing, or to text someone. But then she would remember. Today was about being alone. She had made a pact with herself to not seek out distractions. By the evening, a strange sense of restlessness began to creep in. It was subtle at first, a mild discomfort she couldn't quite place. She tried to ignore it by watching a movie, but the TV felt too loud, too distracting. The walls of the apartment seemed to close in on her as she realized that, despite her best efforts, the silence was starting to feel suffocating. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat on the couch, trying to relax. But the longer she sat there, the more the silence seemed to amplify. It wasn't just quiet, it was deafening. It was as though her thoughts were growing louder with every passing minute, and she couldn't escape them. The second day was harder than the first. Maya had planned on doing some work around the apartment, organizing, cleaning, maybe tackling a few tasks she'd been putting off, but the stillness of the space made it difficult to focus. She had always thrived on human interaction, whether it was a casual conversation at work or spending time with her friends. Without that connection, the world felt small. She tried to keep herself busy reading, writing, and even practicing yoga, but the isolation gnawed at her. She hadn't realized just how much she had relied on social contact until it was no longer there. Even though she had made a conscious decision to disconnect, a part of her was desperately yearning for a simple chat, a smile from a stranger, or even a text from a friend. By the third day, the loneliness had begun to feel like a tangible presence, one that sat beside her, silently observing. It wasn't as though she didn't enjoy her own company. She had always considered herself an independent person, but there was a difference between being content in your own solitude and being isolated. On that evening, she found herself staring at the wall, unable to move. It was as though the world had stopped spinning. Her apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. Her thoughts were loud, each one a reminder of the people she was no longer connected to. The world outside seemed to continue without her. Her friends were posting stories on Instagram. Her coworkers were meeting for happy hour. And life, it seemed, was moving on without her. For the first time, she understood the weight of solitude. The distance she had chosen to create between herself and the world was starting to feel too vast. She picked up her phone again, but the screen remained dark. She had chosen to leave it off, after all. By the fourth day, Maya began to experience a strange shift in her perception of time. The hours seemed to drag on endlessly, each one a blur of silence and self-reflection. The loneliness had turned into something deeper, something more profound. It was no longer just about missing people, it was about missing the connection she had once taken for granted. She found herself sitting by the window, watching people pass by on the street below. There was a woman walking her dog, a man riding his bike, and a couple laughing as they strolled down the sidewalk. Maya's eyes lingered on them, aching for the connection they shared. She couldn't help but wonder how they could move so easily through the world, while she was here, alone in her apartment, disconnected from everything. The desire to reach out to someone, to speak to anyone, was overwhelming. But she didn't. The silence had become more than just a lack of noise. It had become a force that pressed in on her chest, suffocating her. It was as if the very air was thick with isolation. Maya had become keenly aware of every little sound. The hum of the refrigerator, the tapping of her fingers on the table, the beating of her own heart. Each noise seemed to amplify, filling the void with its incessant presence. Her mind, too, had begun to shift. Thoughts that she would normally push aside, insecurities about her career, her friendships, her future now swirled around her with relentless intensity. Without the distractions of the outside world, her fears had nowhere to hide. On the fifth day, she sat in front of her mirror, staring at her reflection. It was as though she was seeing herself for the first time in years. She had become so accustomed to the busyness of her life that she had never truly looked at who she was when no one else was around. She wondered if this was what loneliness did to people. It forced them to confront themselves, to face the parts of their psyche they had been avoiding. Chapter 5. The Breaking Point. The sixth day brought a storm. The weather had turned, and the sound of rain pounding against the window added to the sense of isolation. Maya tried to distract herself with work, but it was hard to focus. Her mind was elsewhere, wandering to places she didn't want to go. It wasn't until she received a notification on her phone that things began to change. The phone had remained silent for days, the stillness unbroken. But now, there was a text. It was from her best friend, Eliza. "Are you okay? Haven't heard from you in days. We miss you. Call me when you get a chance." The message brought a wave of relief and guilt. Maya hadn't realized just how much she had missed her friends. She had cut herself off from everyone, thinking it would help her find peace. But now she understood how deeply the need for human connection ran. She picked up the phone, ready to reach out, but then hesitated. The silence had become too comfortable. The idea of re-entering the world, of engaging with people again, felt overwhelming. She set the phone back down. Chapter 6. The Return to the World. On the seventh day, Maya made a decision. She had spent a week in solitude, in silence, and while she had learned valuable lessons about herself, she knew that living in isolation was not the answer. The peace she had sought was not found in the absence of people. It was found in the connection with others, in the shared experiences, and the laughter that filled the spaces between words. She sent a quick text to Eliza. "Let's get together today. I need to talk." It wasn't much, but it was a start. The door to her apartment felt different now, not a prison, but an entryway to the world she had been avoiding. Maya realized that being alone had given her the clarity she needed, but it was also a reminder that life was meant to be shared. She didn't have to live in isolation to find peace. The key, she understood now, was balance. As she stepped outside, the world seemed more vibrant than it had in days. The sky had cleared, and the streets were filled with life. Maya took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the silence lift from her shoulders. She was ready to reconnect with the world. Maya never forgot the week she spent alone in her apartment. It was a time of self-reflection and understanding, but it was also a reminder that human connection was vital. She learned that silence had its place, but so did the laughter, the conversations, and the shared moments that make life meaningful. From that day forward, she embraced the balance between solitude and connection, knowing that both were necessary for a fulfilling life. And when life became overwhelming, she no longer feared silence, but welcomed it. knowing she had the strength to find her way back to the world when needed.